What's going on, everybody? So today I want to talk about 45 gap. What's the point? Why is it even here? I get comments like that a lot. So I did a video, a full review on this pistol. This is my Glock 37 in 45 gap. And if you don't know what the Glock 37 is, it's basically a Glock 17, except the slide is thicker. Slide is a little bit thicker than a Glock 17, but it's a Glock 17 sized handgun. As a matter of fact, it's a Glock 17 frame. Okay, and what's the point? Before we talk about the point in 2024, because basically it only serves, I think it still has its place in 2024, and I'll explain that. But you have to put ourselves in the proper context of to why this was invented. We have to go back to 2003. So 21 years ago, this cartridge was released with this pistol, okay? They designed this, an engineer, I forget his name, you can look up the details on it, designed this cartridge right here, 45 gap, in conjunction with Speer and Glock. And the point was to fit a 45 caliber round in a pistol the size of a 9mm, a full-size 9mm service pistol, that it would accept 45 caliber projectiles. Now, if you don't know what 45 gap is, for some folks that don't know, there it is. It's about 1/8 of an inch shorter than 45 ACP. 45 ACP, 45 gap. And we'll discuss some of the changes. They didn't just shorten the cartridge. They made a few other changes. But that was the point. But there was something going on. I know with your 2024 brain, you're thinking, well, it still doesn't make sense. In 2003, we were at the tail end of the 1994 assault weapons ban, which, amongst other things, banning certain features on rifles. We had these featureless, no muzzle brakes, no bayonet lugs. If it had a pistol grip, you can go back. If you lived through it, you know what I'm talking about. If you're an older person, you lived through it, you know what I'm talking about. I lived all the way through that stuff, okay? And, all right, and it was supposed to sunset in 2004, but that wasn't a guarantee. Congress could have reauthorized it, easily reauthorized that. And had we had a different president, Bush signed off, Bush just let it die. If Congress had sent it, a reauthorization of that to the president, a different president maybe, a different Congress, and they would have signed it, we'd have still been living under that, okay? So we had a 10-round mag extension, a 10-round mag a 10-round capacity limit on our magazines. All right. Now you could still get the Preban mags and stuff like that. I want to show you. I got some mags here too to show you. So what you nowadays, over 2 decades later, okay, this is one of the times we actually got some of our freedoms back, which was a shock to a lot of us. But you're talking about at the time in 2003. You could still have the Preban mags. They call them Preban mags. You could still have them. You could still trade them. They were out there in the market, but they were really expensive. A Glock 17 mag back then was $75. 21 years ago, $75. Okay, you can get them for $10 now. This is a Glock 45 mag, but it's basically the same thing. It's a Glock 17. Your Glocks came with this. This is where I still have this from all these years ago. 10 round, and some of the states that have 10 round mags, you still have these crap ass things, right? So all the way up until then, they would have to be magazines, newly manufactured magazines during this ban would have to be manufactured with the law enforcement, restricted to law enforcement and government only, which is why it's Glock 19 mag. I don't know if you can see it. See, Glock Inc., Smyrna, Georgia, 9/13/94. So this was made right after the ban. What's that say? Restricted LE/government only. So every high capacity magazine, all right, made after the 94 ban, which is now 30 years since it was, 3 decades since it was instituted, since it was signed into freaking law, all the magazines, anything over 10 rounds had to be marked like this. All right? So, it doesn't matter what model gun you're buying, 10 rounds was the limit. That was it. Again, pre-ban mags were expensive as hell, $75, $100 a piece, depending on the gun. I remember P7 M13 mags were $125. Now, that might not sound like a lot of money nowadays for like some staccato mags and stuff like that, but we're talking about 30 years ago since it was implemented and 21 years ago since it sunset. Now, we have the benefit of hindsight. It's 2020. We know now that it sunsetted, but all the way up until the night that law sunsetted, the Democrats were fighting to reinstate the sucker. So we still didn't know. We were like, oh, and as soon as that thing ended, boy, the floodgates opened. We got all our magazines again. We could get the Glock 17 mags really cheap and all that other kind of stuff. Now, I say that because, again, this was released, the Gap was released in 2003, a year before the ban was supposed to sunset. But as I just stated, we didn't know the future. We had figured, we've been living under that thing for 10 years. So we figured they're going to reinstate that. They're going to re-up that sucker and we're going to be living under this crap forever because you rarely get any of your freedoms back. This was one of the times, as I said before. So when this was invented, the Glock 21, which I do not have, the Glock 21 was the full-size .45 automatic pistol for Glock. And it is huge. Okay, its grip's huge, all kinds of stuff. It's a big gun, all right? And you only got, well, then 10 rounds, but you only get like 13. You get 13 plus 1, 14, something like that, in that gun of 45. Not a lot of people. There are a certain segment of that population that cannot even grip that gun. It's such a fat, it feels like a bar of soap. You know, when people complain about Glocks, they call them blocks. It was huge. So they're like, can we, since it's 10 rounds only, right? Why don't we come up with a 45 caliber pistol cartridge that'll fit in a 9mm sized handgun, full-size service pistol. They make the 38 too, which is Glock 19 size. Since everybody's restricted to 10 rounds, and here's the magazine, okay, for the 45 Gap, as you can see on there. Here's the magazine that came with God knows what 9mm pistol I bought back in the day during the ban. So they're basically, since don't believe me, they're same size. Don't believe me, here. Look at what's it say. 9mm, 10 round magazine, 45 Gap pistol. It's the same size, okay? So they were saying, since you have 10 rounds only, and that's what you're limited to, why wouldn't you want 10 rounds of 45, of a 45 caliber projectile? And this is a 200 grain 45 caliber projectile. Normal 45 autos, 230 ball, but they make them in 200s and 185s and all kinds of different grains. So why wouldn't you want a more powerful cartridge than 9mm? Now, it makes sense. When you get 17 plus 1, when you get 18 rounds of 9mm in a gun, this is Glock 45, so it's 19 slide on a 17 frame. But let me just show you, side note here, 45 Gap mag, 45 Glock 45. They're the same size, okay? So if in today's context, if you can get 17 rounds of 9mm in the same size gun, this makes no sense. For people in free states, I'm gonna touch on that a little bit later. But at the time, again, even the Glock 17s were limited to 10 round magazines in this size of a gun. So their idea was, we can give them a more powerful 45 caliber projectile. Since you have the same capacity, why wouldn't you want a 45 caliber? And now people are like, because again, if you had a 380 in that size, it would limit it to 10. So if you're I wouldn't want, somebody's gonna say, no, I'd rather have the 9. Okay, well then why not just get the 380 then? because you want the more powerful 9. And then conversely, you want the more powerful 45. There were actually police agencies, I don't know if they still carry, but that carried these and stuff. So one of the reasons it was limited to 10 was because of the law. I think they could probably also only fit 10 in here because of size, weight constraints, and all that other kind of stuff, the size of the grip. But that was the point at 2003. 21 years later, it's not that, it does not make as much sense as it did back then. So please, I know we have, as people, we have this problem where we look through history with modern eyes. Try to put yourself back then in the middle or at the tail end of what was a sunsetting assault weapons ban, which we didn't know was going to sunset. The Glock 21 is a huge gun, okay? We already were restricted to 10 rounds only. If you are restricted to 10 rounds by law, why would you not want 10 rounds of 45 over 10 rounds of 9? It's the same thing as, like I said, why would you not round 10 rounds of 9 over 10 rounds of 380? If you can get an exact same size gun in 9mm that you could get in 380, why would you not choose 10 rounds of 9 over 10 rounds of 380? So some people's idea was, why would you not choose 10 rounds of 45 caliber over 9mm, which is 35 caliber. It's .355 and 45 is .451. Why would you not do that? So that was their idea. And it had some pretty good success in the first couple of years. As soon as the ban ended, what's the point? What's the point? Because now you can get this, you can get the high cap mags for $10 again. Overnight, people's $75 Glock 17 mags went to $10. They were worthless. They were worthless. So that's what killed us, was the sunsetting of the assault weapons ban. Now, in today's context, if you live in a state where you, behind enemy lines, in a communist state, where you are not allowed to have more than 10 round magazines in a full-size service pistol, why would you not take 10 rounds of 45 gap, which I'm going to do a comprehensive test between 45 gap and 45 auto. Their mission was to get the same, if not better, ballistics out of 45 gap than 45 auto. And some of the changes they did, they thickened up the web on the bottom, which is the thick part. It's like a cup on the bottom of the cartridge. We'll go over more of that in detail, but real quick, why would you not want 10 rounds of 45 gap over 10 rounds of 9, if that's what you're limited to and stuck with in a commie state? I personally would rather have a Glock 37 in a commie state than a Glock 17, because you can't get the mags. What's the point? Now, some of the things they did to upgrade 45 gap. If you can see, I don't know if you can see right here, you might be able to see the little bulge right down there, right there's the line. That's where the bottom of this projectile goes. Typically, when you're reloading, being a reloader, and I've reloaded 45 auto for decades, you typically, between about 4.5 and 5 grains of powder is typically what any powder, you can adjust it there, but that's just a rough thing. That only comes to about right here on the cartridge case. So it's very low. And if you know how a cartridge works, there's a thick cup of brass that goes like this, like a U, called a web. So the powder, so there's a lot of airspace between here and the bottom of the projectile. A lot of airspace. They figured out there's room to bring that all the way down here and have it, there's just lots of empty room in here that's not needed, because 45 auto is not a high pressure cartridge. So there's a lot of air space in between the top of the powder and the bottom of the projectile. We could shrink that like they did with the 308, 7.62 by 51, 7.62 NATO for the 30-06. Same thing. They're like, hang on a minute. And advancements in powder, they were able to shrink the cartridge down and get the same performance, basically. So to do that, they wanted to avoid, because you're increasing the pressure when you do that, to avoid case blowouts and case head separation and cartridge failure. They strengthened the web of the case on this. They also made it a small pistol primer because of the way the ejector is in there. See how the ejector is angled in there? On a 45 auto, it's more straight. They didn't want that ejector accidentally hitting the side of a large pistol primer and setting it off. So that's one of the reasons they did that. So in 2003, a year before the ban ended, this gun made sense. And it was fairly popular. I'm not going to say it was a superstar, but it was fairly popular. As soon as the ban ended, that was it. It was dead, because then there was no point in it. You still get 45 auto performance, if not better. And again, we're going to test that out on the range. You still get 45 caliber performance out of a 9mm sized handgun. And I'm going to repeat myself, during the ban, because everybody was stuck to 10 rounds anyway, it made sense. It's a 45 caliber handgun in the size of a 9mm. Again, you saw here's the Glock 45, same size. It is a Glock 17 frame, other than this has the 19 slider. But you saw me put the mags in. They're the same. They work just the same. So that was the point. People asking, what's the point? That was the point back then. The fact that Glock still keeps making it and they still keep making runs of the ammo, I don't know how much longer that's going to go on. It's basically been going on. It's been, like I said, a dead cartridge for almost 20 years probably before the popularity really went down. And then 357 SIG came out. There's a lot of cartridges that became the new hotness and stuff that helped kill this. But it's my opinion that this still has a place in banned states. Why, again, why wouldn't you? Give me a good reason why you would not want this 10 rounds of 45 gap over 10 rounds of 9mm in the same size gun. I personally would, but it makes no sense here because we can get tons of, we're free here. So, but there it is, guys. That's the reason. That's hopefully will answer the question why some people keep putting comments on this video or on the short, or that's dumb and that's it. You don't know the history of it. At the time, it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense at the time. So there it is, guys. Let me know what you think about in the comments below. And old guys, shout out to the old guys down there. Leave a comment about if you remember living through that stupid 94 assault weapons ban. Thank God it ended. That was just the dumbest thing ever. So there it is, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time.